Let me begin by thanking Norby and Maria. Today I am merely a host, not a preacher. But because they are pastors, they knew that after the election this week, there was some pastoral work to be done. So let me begin as pastor. To any of you who have felt vulnerable this week after the election, we honor you. We stand with you. You will never be alone. You are welcome. You are beloved. For I know that many of you have had a physical fear of feeling endangered this week. Not all, but enough of you that have come to speak to me. You are not just disappointed or worried about the future in the abstract, but feel personally threatened because of who you are. You have felt physically in danger again, your body remembering before your mind even comprehended. You have sobbed. Tears keep coming. The panic attack arose. You had to go home. You became ill, a physical reaction. Like a veteran's panic at loud blasts. We are not saying get over it. Because if you can't afford meds for real mental illness, for your heart instability, if your cancer treatments will not be paid for without a subsidy, your life really is at risk. Carol Genovese talked to that young man in the waiting room in Beth Israel this week. If in the past you've been groped by those more powerful than you, you felt physically endangered again as if a license had been granted for it. If you've been spat on as a gay man, bullied into submission, called a nigger, told to go back home, shoved to the ground because one wife held hands with her wife in public. If a swastika has been painted on your fence, then your body would heave in fear. The devout Muslim mother this week calling her daughter, begging her to remove the headscarf, marking her. A Mexican woman, a young Harvard student that Norby and Maria and I and Jim met this week, unable to leave her house on Wednesday, a visceral fear. Our dear foreign visitors from Eastern Europe, fearful for all the implications for them. Sean and I, as your pastors, know you felt this way. We hear you, we see you, we stand with you. And this congregation does too, because we always are called to stand with the most vulnerable, to stand against any hateful language, whoever hurls it, to align with whomever feels forgotten by the powerful, economically without hope in red state or blue. Because Jesus always sought out the rejected, the one poor as Lazarus at the gate, his wounds licked by dogs, or rich as Zacchaeus up in the tree who we spoke of last week. To all of them, he said, healing happens only when we share our wealth, when we stand with the most vulnerable, when we know that love alone is stronger than hate. We have work to do, deep wounds to heal. Molly Basquette-Long, a minister in Somerville and now with the new congregation, gathered her church this week and they sang the hymn we began with, "Oh God, our help in ages past." But as good Christian thinkers, as we seek to be here, they knew that the words of that hymn that says our defense is sure, just like the concluding words of Luke's lesson that Mario read, not a hair on your head will be harmed, they're not true, literally. Basquette says our defense is anything but sure. God does not promise us safety in this world. Jesus knew his followers would be persecuted. What God does promise is that no powers, no evil will finally ever separate us from his love. Nothing can do that. God doesn't invite us into the protection of some magical shield, but into the safety of one another, into the safety that we can provide each other when we come together and are Christ to one another, like the white man in Boston whose picture was posted on the Facebook page of a Muslim friend of mine yesterday. He stood outside the Roxbury Mosque as thousands streamed in for the weekly Friday Jummah prayer, holding a handwritten sign that said, "I stand with my Muslim neighbors." He must have been outside for over an hour, my friend wrote, offering endless smiles and greetings to 1,500 of us who came for prayer. So there's a movement afoot. If you want to be allies in public spaces to those feeling vulnerable, wear a safety pin, clearly, visibly, wherever you go, because it says, if you wear a hijab, I'll sit with you on the tee. If you're trans, I will walk into the bathroom with you. If you are a person of color and you are stopped by law enforcement, I will stand and be with you. If you're an immigrant, I'll help you find resources. A survivor, I'll believe you. A veteran, I will take up your fight. If you're LGBTQ, I'll remind you you are beautiful and beloved, just as God made you. If you're a woman, I'll make sure you get home okay, and if you need me, I will be there. All I ask is you be with me too. Together, we'll be that strong arm of God. Friends, at King's Chapel, we've been preparing for this moment all fall without maybe even knowing it. In September and October, you organized a series of lectures on Islam by learned scholars, opened it to the public. You held a conversation about homosexuality in the Bible at a neighborhood bar. You hosted transgender men, women, families right here in this sanctuary, speaking at that reading desk. 35 clergy standing on this chancel, Jewish, Muslim, all hues of Christian, telling the public that church is not just those who condemn transgender people, but us, all of us here. So many of you were there welcoming people. Our religion compels us to stand alongside all, shoulder to shoulder, our brothers and sisters. But we're ready for another reason. And it's really been instilled on me this week as I have stood and learned from our friends from Transylvania. Those whose faith is deep and strong despite all the trials that they have gone through. Because I learned this week and I remembered that I sat in a small group on prayer this fall with one of our members who voted for Trump and one who did not. And together we found the meaning in the Lord's Prayer. O Radiant One, our prayers began. You shine within us, outside us. Even darkness shines when we remember. And that's so central because any work that we are called to do has to be grounded in love. That's what Maria has said all week. That is what Norby has said all week. It must be steeped in love, filled with it, swimming in its current, because without love, we are that noisy gong or clanging cymbal, pompous finger waggers. Only love can conquer fear. Only love is stronger than hate. I don't know where any of you are right now. You may be ready to move on. You may be grieving. You may be not at all concerned because you're convinced that we actually took a better turn for the future in the election. But wherever you are personally, for us as a church called to love, we need to ask, what do we do in the next 12 months? What are we poised to do already? I don't know, but it will be something like this, being galvanized for our justice work in the city. 3 years ago, we began to consider how we would do that. Someone has just stepped forward to say, I will help lead that process. Together, we'll make decisions and as we do so, we'll be talking to the mothers whose children died this year from guns in Boston. We'll talk to those street workers who tend the families of gang members and try to shepherd kids to school, personal connections. And then together, we'll decide. Standing for social justice here and now as a church. Second, we'll steward our position on this freedom trail. We're going to deeply explore our slave-owning history. It says something powerful in this time. For it's time to learn and then to begin to teach truths about America that we all have to understand about the impacts of slavery and how we cruelly denigrate one another in Boston, across this land. We're going to talk about the founders and what they meant by religious freedom, not the so-called religious freedom that allows a business to discriminate against gays, but the freedom our founders meant when they said every American, Muslim and Jew and evangelical and Unitarian, to worship as we understand it. We have a gift here in this location from our forebears. More than 250,000 people come through every year from across the globe. They come from red states and from blue ones, all to learn. Do we teach them that there was a battle once between brave-hearted colonists and old world Tories? Or do we take the opportunity to say much more, the greater depth of the history that we have to teach? We are poised for it because Sean has applied for a grant so he can learn about other major historic sites grappling with their slavery past. And this year, you hired your first full-time director of our Freedom Trail program. Third, we have to do this work as people grounded in love, steeped in it, sinking in it, swimming in it. So your ministers yearn for us all to delve into that spirit and experience it. If you had seen yesterday the way Norby spoke of that, the way Maria talked of understanding the transcendent coming close, small groups led by you, with the support from Sean and me about Howard Thurman, the black mystic from the 1950s, Julian of Norwich, Desmond Tutu, St. Francis Hafiz, a Sufi poet, writings sent by our friends in Transylvania who've stayed grounded in their faith through hundreds of years of trials. If we're going to be active in the city, if we're going to share our true history, we have to do it as a church, not as a museum, a nonprofit, a community club. We are King's Chapel, a church 330 years in the making with a sanctuary and a prayer book and a sung worship as our inheritance. Here we say in our covenant, we unite in the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus Christ for the worship of God and for the service of man, the service of all humanity. We have a legacy. We are called. We will stand together. For divided, we will always remain vulnerable. Together, we can be God's great and loving instrument for peace. Oh, may it be so.